We have been getting you stories from the United Kingdom and France, two countries that are expected to hold elections within a few weeks. But the similarities go beyond that. The election strategy being used by the two incumbents show interesting parallels. The reasons might be different, but the vision is the same. Let's start with the two quotes we are looking at today. First, the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Recently, Sunak had a warning for the British voters. He said, and I'm quoting, "If Labour wins this time, they will change the rules so that they are in power for a long time. So if you don't know what Labour will do, don't vote for them." Let's go across to neighbouring France now. President Emmanuel Macron held a press conference recently where he said, and I'm quoting again, "The National Rally is a political project that won't be able to respond to the insecurity you experience, the voters. I have confidence that the French people will make the right decision." Both quotes seek to invoke a sense of urgency among the voters, where the onus is on the voters to save their respective countries by not choosing the opposition. This comes at a time when both leaders, Rishi Sunak and Emmanuel Macron, are facing unprecedented anti-incumbency. In the United Kingdom, Sunak and the Tories are trailing in the opinion polls. Just yesterday, for the very first time, Sunak fell below the Reform UK's Nigel Farage in popularity ratings. This after Farage joined the UK's race to power less than a month ago. Polls suggest that Sunak might even lose his own seat from Richmond. Over in France, Macron faced a shock defeat in European Union's parliamentary elections. The numbers were abysmal, to say the least. The far-right party secured over 30% of the seats, whereas Macron's party could not secure even half of that. The French president resorted to calling for snap elections shortly after. Experts say that he is gambling on his political career with this move. Now, these are the two leaders who came from parties that have been at the helm of power for a long time. Sunak's Tory party has dominated British politics for about 200 years. They have governed for straight 14 years, with the Indian American taking charge in the challenging times of 2022, when the Downing Street saw 3 different prime ministers within 3 months. In France, Emmanuel Macron has been the president for about 7 years now. He was the youngest president to take charge at 39 years old. Macron's centrist party came like a breather for the French. The voters were shuttling between decades-long dominance of the two traditional main left-wing and the right-wing parties. Cut to today, both these leaders seem to have their backs to the wall. And instead of pitching their governance record or saying that they could do differently, they are desperately trying to convince voters why their rivals will be a bad choice. Let's look at the best choice then. The top issues for voters in both countries are the economy and the cost of living. In the UK, inflation rate is standing at 2.3%. In France, people are struggling under shrinkflation, which basically means that the quality of your products are reducing, rather the quantity of the products are reducing, but the prices are rising. Next is healthcare. UK's National Health Services have been in headlines for all the wrong reasons. The NHS has more than 7.5 million cases pending as we speak. France's healthcare was ranked number 1 by the WHO in the year 2000. 24 years later, over 50% of its healthcare workers are reporting exhaustion because of the skewed demand and supply. All right, then we come to immigration, a topic that has polarized countries across Europe. Rishi Sunak's Stop the Boats pledge has clearly not stopped the boats. 14 years after the Conservatives' rule, net immigration is more than 2.5 times before their term. In France, 2023 saw a 17% jump in illegal border crossings. Crime is another major concern for voters in both the countries. The UK has almost 150 prisoners per 100,000 people. France is grappling with hate crimes. There was a jump of 32% from 2022 to 2023. Lastly, we come to environment. There's a lot of talk around climate change in London as well as Paris, but very little action from either of the incumbents. All right, to take this further, we are now being joined by Professor Scott Lucas. He's joining us live from Birmingham. He is a professor of international politics at the Clinton Institute, University College, Dublin. Professor Lucas, thank you so much for joining us here on WION. Good to see you. I want to ask you, what do you make of these two countries that we're closely looking at and the parallels we are drawing?
I think in both countries, as you've identified, you've had governments that have been in power for quite some time, that to say the least are facing challenges. But I think beyond that, there are some major differences to talk about. First of all, when we talk about the situations in the two countries, while both face economic challenges, they face social challenges, the big difference, of course, is that the UK has left the European Union because of Brexit. France, despite its economic difficulties, is still in the EU. Its economic future, therefore, is much brighter than that of the UK, which could be in stagnation or even recession for some time to come. I think the bigger difference beyond that, though, is, and we need to be very clear about this, is that whereas in the UK you have an opposition from the centre, you have the Labour Party. North of the border, you have the Scottish National Party, which you could say is a centre-left party. In France, the major opposition party now is a party of the far right, the National Rally. The UK has an equivalent of a far right party called the Reform Party, but it's kind of an upstart party. It doesn't really have that much depth, and I think it has problems because of the UK's different electoral first past the post system. So I think the real question, the real difference between the UK and France is, do we see a far right party with all the problems that that poses in terms of dividing society, in terms of introducing hate speech in society? Do we see a far-right party finally winning the French presidency at the end of this month?
All right, Professor Lucas, since you spoke about the far right so much, let me ask you this. Why do you think Europe is standing where it is? Why do you think there is a rise in the far right?
Well, I want to be clear here because there's been some really misleading headlines.
All right.
France has a rise in the far right. But across the continent, it's very much more of a mixed picture. For example, a lot of people said Germany had a surge in the far right. In fact, in last week's European election polls, the hard right AfD, which was predicted to take more than 20% of the vote, only got 15%. And most of that was in East Germany. Then look at other countries. Look at countries, for example, such as the Netherlands, where the center left continued to be the leading party and held back the hard right of Geert Wilders. Look at other countries such as Spain, Portugal, and where I am now in Ireland, where the far right was pushed to the margins and the center held. And look at Scandinavia, where in fact center-left parties actually are resurgent and the far right drifted back. So in other words, instead of saying the far right is ascendant across Europe, you have to go on a country-by-country basis because, of course, the issues differ from country to country.
All right, Professor Lucas, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your insights.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.